So maybe you could talk us through, again, what is MINDSPACE and how should people think about using it?
Well, MINDSPACE is the gene code of human society. It's the ultimate tool to design behavioral change intervention, the tool for social engineering in a good sense of the word. What I said before means that when we design interventions to change behavior, essentially we need to be mindful about engaging not just the reflective system 2 thinking, but also automatic system 1 thinking, speaking more to Homer Simpson as he's making a lot more of the decision making, we think. So MINDSPACE is a mnemonic of 9 techniques that can influence our behavior in automatic ways. And it was developed by behavioral experts, myself, and published in a peer-reviewed journal. And there's a strong evidence in the field of behavior supporting the individual techniques. And we've been testing techniques across the whole domain of policymaking, from education, environment protection, healthcare, finance, you name it. And also many business applications. A lot of private companies are using MINDSPACE as their guiding framework to design campaigns, marketing campaigns, design organizational change, and so on. And it's very practical, easily applied to many traditional activities to enhance the impact that we have on human action. And so MINDSPACE brings together a large body of literature on contextual influence on human behavior. And it's important to note that there is a significance to the order of the 9 techniques. There is no significance to the order of the 9 techniques. You can apply them in any random combination. But MINDSPACE stands for messenger, incentives, norms, defaults, salience, priming, affect, commitments, and ego. So messenger essentially means that we are heavily influenced by who communicates the information, not what the information is about. We automatically defer to formal sources of authority. We act more likely on information when the messenger is similar to ourselves, somebody like me who speaks the same way, behaves the same way. And we also affected by the feelings of the messenger, by the status of the messenger. For example, people listen to advice and follow advice by advisors who have similar values, shared goals, and similar intentions, even same-sex marriage. But if I imitate overtly or covertly your actions as we stand in front of each other, you're more likely to like me because he's a bit like me. For example, you can do that in sales. So turning good advice into action, breaching the intention-action gap is well done by messengers, effective messengers. So moving on briefly, next principle is incentives. Our responses to incentives are shaped by predictable mental shortcuts, such as strongly avoiding losses and others. So we dislike losses more than we like gains of equivalent amount. We are loss averse. We also value an incentive depending on where we see it from. Is it more expensive than something or cheaper than something that we have in our mind, our mental anchor or other price in the environment? We are more prone to overestimate small probabilities when we encounter stochastic situations or a gamble of some kind. And we can imagine the events panning out in our favor and we overestimate small chances to win big amounts. That's why lotteries are so effective to change behavior. Give people a small chance to win amount of money and they go for it as a tool to change their behaviors. We often pay participants in our experiments, in our interventions with lottery tickets. And finally, another incentives related behavioral law or principle is our consistent desire to live for today at the expense for tomorrow. So give small incentive immediately now and here, and people are more likely to do something and be motivated. So yes, in your interventions, definitely use the incentives principle, design lotteries, put money in an account, and they can lose some of this money if they don't behave, and so on. And this will be a very effective way to influence their actions. And the third principle from MINDSPACE is called norms. We are strongly influenced by what others do. We imitate other people and people like us. We imitate what they do. We do what they value. And often we are not aware that we do so. So telling people what the social norm is, what the majority of people like us are doing is very likely to influence our actions. And we've shown that left, right, and center in many situations, telling people that majority of others have paid their debt already makes huge difference to the motivation of the debtors to repay their debt very quickly. And this is my claim to fame. I was using this work with HMRC in UK, one of the biggest policy trials ever in the history of behavioral insights, making people pay their tax on time. But there are other applications in health and customer behavior understanding. The next principle from the MINDSPACE sequence is defaults. We go with the flow of preset options. We regularly accept what the default setting is, what the status quo is. If you make people automatically enrolled into a pension or organ donation program, they're very likely that they're never going to go opt out. If you are giving them a choice to opt in into something, people procrastinate, delay, they feel sense of future regrets, changing the current status quo, and that's why they never opt in into a pension or some kind of a customer program or pension of investment or organ donation program and so on.
Ivo, can I
So,
ask what's actually happening there with the default? It always strikes me that the results on default just seem so extreme. But what are people just making the assumption that this is the best course of action, or somebody else has thought about this being the best course of action? What do you think is actually at play there?
well, there are many theories why defaults work, but the most famous one, most accepted one, is because we have a sense of loss. We are going to lose the status quo, whatever the current status quo, the current default is. You're not investing in pension, and you feel like if you start investing in your pension or you start doing something else, for example, putting money aside a rainy day, this is going to bring you a regret and you're losing the current situation, whatever the current status quo is, the current default is. It's kind of a sense of losing something or regretting it later. Another theory is that we think that the default is the social norm, is the accepted wisdom, is the recommended option. And maybe both are true. I can't argue now for or against one or the other. But what I know for sure, the default is extremely effective way. When in doubt, use default. It's the silver bullet at behavioral change. There's something about human nature, the fact that we tend to procrastinate acting, even when we know that acting is in our favor. There's our sense of inertia and desire to continue with the ongoing habits of everyday life is what really powers, puts fuel in the effectiveness of the default technique.
And so if you had so if you had limited time and budget and you had to sort of roll the dice, if you like, on one of the MINDSPACE techniques, would be defaults be the one that you'd sort of suggest people start with first? If there's a way you can make that desired behavior the default, that's a good place to start?
Absolutely. It's by far the most effective techniques in behavioral change in general. Also talking about reflective techniques, more kind of a persuasive techniques, or like goal setting and planning and providing information about the consequence of real behavior, purely engaging system to rational thinking, including those messages and those kind of families of techniques. Again, defaults comes on top because we see, for example, in retirement saving, when people are auto-enrolled in pension, for example, 86% remain in the default pension group. And when you ask them to make an active choice, join a pension, 49% choose the pension. You're talking about almost doubling the number of people actually joining. In Sweden, even more shocking example was when people auto-enroll in the pension, the whole nation, right? And then quite interesting, the government said, well, we have 456 investment plans available to you to choose from, but we have to choose one for everybody by default, because you can't start a pension without a default of some kind, some investment you put your money into. But please make a choice. And they beamed on television and billboards and radio campaign, make a choice. After 3 years of national campaigning, 92% of the nation chose the default plan, remained in the default investment plan. I mean, there's no way you can explain that about people who really like this little one of the 456 plans that the government had available. I mean, some plans are more risky, some riskier, some are more safer, with a shorter horizon, with a longer horizon of your pension investment returns, whatever. You cannot explain that with some kind of a stable beliefs and values and attitudes towards investing, risk and money in the future and time horizons. It's just extraordinary, the impact of the default. So yeah, when in doubt, use defaults. And the next principle for MINDSPACE is salience. Our attention is drawn to what is novel, what seem relevant to us, essentially. So our behavior is greatly influenced by what our attention is drawn to. And we're more likely to focus our attention on something that we understand, something simple. And the more we understand something, the way it's presented to us, the more likely to pay attention to it. And we pay attention also to things that relate to our personal experiences, that I can really say, oh, yes, I've seen that before. I experienced something like it. You kind of zoom in on this information, and you'll be surprised how much is left out, even if it's in front of our eyes. Shocking, really. So use the salience principle to make changes on what people pay attention and what kind of decisions they make as a result of it. And so the next principle is priming our acts and influence by subconscious cues that into our memories and make certain information more accessible, but on the back of our head. So we cannot really see it with our mental eye, but it's still there lurking in the background and can always flip into our decision making and influence our choices. Exposing people to words can prime their behavior, exposing them to sounds, smells, any kind of information.
I'm curious on this one. So some of the viewers might have heard about this idea of the replication crisis that's happened within behavioral science, and priming's kind of one of those areas where, they've tried to recreate some of those sort of seminal studies, and it's been challenging, maybe for a number of different reasons. I mean, where do you stand on that? Should we forget about priming, or is it just a new way of thinking about it?
Well, it's a new way of thinking about it, but the problem of priming is that it's very contextual. Everything about human behavior, as I said before, we are heavily influenced by the context. So it's extremely important when you're trying to replicate these studies is to actually replicate the context. And the context also includes the mindset of the people walking into the room or walking down the corridor where they're exposed to this priming stimulus, right? So it's extremely difficult to replicate the context because the context, the environment, the situation is very rich. And part of the problem, and also the mental context as well of the people going through this experiment. I think this is the challenge for replication, but many of the priming experiments have replicated, some haven't. I have a very famous experiment where they're trying to make people wash their hands, clinicians, nurses, and patients in hospitals. So instead of providing information about the benefits of washing your hands with alcohol gel that you see on the hospital walls, we kind of release a smell of citrus fruit like lemons, oranges, which reminds people subconsciously about hand washing liquids, the ones that you use in the toilets, which triple the rate of people actually hitting the dispenser, rubbing their hands with a hospital gel. And this is extremely important during COVID now, of course. But yeah, so triple the rate. Nobody was aware of the influence of the smell, but subconsciously somebody was priming or reminding them about hand hygiene and their habits of washing their hands. So we did that in Miami. We could not replicate that in Birmingham. It turns out in Birmingham, the barrier to the behavior, hand washing behavior, was different. They are all very keen and they remember they had to wash their hands, contrary to their American colleagues who actually needed a reminder because they wanted to wash their hands, but they couldn't remember because of a busy hospital. In Birmingham, they knew how to wash their hands, but didn't want to wash their hands because they didn't believe this is the enforced cultural norm within the organization. And that's why our priming experiment didn't work. They didn't need any reminder. What they needed is kind of establishing new organizational norms of behavior. And this is the pinnacle of behavioral science. You need to understand your audience, dissect their minds, and figure out why they're not doing what they're meant to be doing and attack this problem with one of the mind's techniques or one of the techniques within each of the MINDSPACE categories. Because it's important to find the right switch for the behavior.
Just on priming, I'm just curious about how you think about that. So is it the idea that we have these sort of patterns of behavior that are sort of sitting there and activated, and then suddenly the prime kind of somehow turns the electricity on into those particular circuits, and then they're just a little bit readier to fire in a new situation? What's a way that the audience could sort of just put into context that idea of priming and what's actually happening beneath the surface?
It's one of these things you just said. It's mental habits, also motor habits. They're sitting there and you're priming them, making them a bit more active in a neural language. So when you're looking for information to decide what you want to do, this information is readily available and tends to influence your decision. And if it's a pattern of behavior or motor command, is the first one that comes to your hand, at your disposal. And the mental habits, the motor habits, they're just ideas or concepts. Everything that stays in your memory could be slightly more active, enters your decision-making, your working memory is a technical language. Essentially, they enters your mind as you're making your mind up what you want to do or what you should do. And whatever this information is going to be there, it's going to be impacting what you think and what you do. And this information could come in many shapes and forms, such as motor commands, like mental habits, some memories from childhood, the fact that you're a loser, maybe the fact that you always tend to like this product or that manager, that could be a mental habit that is triggered by the priming information, or it could be just a concept. Red, oh, something dangerous, or green, I'm allowed to walk or allowed to do something, or blue, relax. Simple color can actually change how you make a choice. So So priming is a rich set of influences, but broadly, all of them rely on the same psychological mechanism. You make certain things from your memory, all kinds of memories, motor images, facts, and patterns of thinking, etc. You make them more available to enter your consciousness or your decision-making process. Bang, they impact your choice and actions. So yeah, moving on, A from MINDSPACE stands for affect. Affect, our emotional associations can powerfully shape our actions. And this is a no-brainer. I'm going to insult your intelligence telling you that provoking emotion has been shown to change all kinds of behaviors. Just look at the images on cigarette packages, right? So it puts you off, sense of disgust, and humor, sadness, expected regret, anger. These emotions can shape choices quite quickly. Something called affect heuristic. You think that you're making a rational decision based on the information in front of you, but in fact, you make a decision based on the emotional response that the information provokes in you.
But you told me about a study, I think it was based in Croydon or Brixton, where they were trying to reduce antisocial behavior with some of the imagery that they used in graffiti in the area. Do you remember the study? Could you share a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, this is with baby faces.
Yeah, the baby face. Yeah. That's
right. Yeah, that's a funny one. Yeah, what they found is that evolutionary round faces, big eyes, the typical Mickey Mouse shape imitate the baby's head. And the shape of the baby head is actually designed by nature to provoke sense of nurture and care. Apparently, people must have killed their babies when they had resources to take care of them. And they just said, well, hang on a minute, you can't just kill your babies. From now on, you should feel a sense of nurturing and respect and caring feelings when you see this round head and big round eyes in front of you. And yeah, the ones who did feel nurture and care and respect for the babies, they evolved and their genes survived. The ones who started banging the heads of their babies on the head, they didn't survive, or their genes didn't propagate. So yeah, this kind of sense of nurture that the baby face provokes, and the Mickey Mouse or the manga, if that's your thing, they're quite powerful. And what colleagues of mine did in different parts of London, but they started in Greenwich. They wanted to reduce antisocial behaviors. And so they painted the metal shop shutters at one part in Greenwich with babies' faces. They sampled local kids from the area. They took pictures of the local kids and they used them as models for these baby faces. And that reduced antisocial behaviors. People didn't want to speak on a baby. Maybe you want to destroy the graffiti, paint on these baby faces, or do antisocial acts. Kind of the feeling sense of nurture and care. And talking about provoking emotions, another evidence-based intervention to reduce antisocial behaviors is music, like Mozart, Debussy, particularly calming music. I think the London Tube, the Underground, and certain areas, council estates in London, some rough areas as well, and also McDonald's did trials when they're beaming music. It makes people calm down, triggers different types of emotions. So there's a significant decrease in the number of antisocial behaviors in the area. And the most beautiful thing about music is because it's beautiful, but not only this is just beautiful and provokes aesthetic feelings, but also you cannot avoid it. You can turn your attention away, remember the salience principle, and not see something. But music comes into your head from all sides. You can close your eyes, you can turn around, you can run away, but you still want to hear the sound. The same with smells.
Same with smell,
So when in doubt, use music. It's definitely going to penetrate the head of the person you're targeting.
Superb. And tell us a bit about commitment then.
Yeah, C is for commitments. We seek to be consistent with our public promises, and we also tend to reciprocate acts. So it's very simple. You set up a goal, you create a plan to achieve the goal, and then what? Well, the person who sets up a goal and declares that they're going to achieve this goal, they're more likely to do it. It's one of the social techniques or sets of techniques that we use quite a lot because people don't want to lose face, broadly speaking, and they don't want to disappoint others. Apparently, evolutionarily speaking, the ones who disappointed the tribe didn't survive for long. So we need to fulfill your group commitments, and the act of writing a commitment can increase the likelihood of being fulfilled, the commitment. And a common method for increasing the costs for failure is also to make the commitment public. We use it a lot. It's really effective way, and reciprocation is a form of commitment. So if another way to make somebody feel committed to do what you ask them to do is to do a little favor for them in advance, and they feel reciprocated. They feel the need to reciprocate your favor. So I did something nice. I book you an appointment well, for your job center meeting, we've done that before, or book your appointment for the dentist and send them a special card with a thank you message maybe, or give them a little present of chocolates and God knows what. That makes the person committed to reciprocate your kindness, and they're more likely to do what you ask them to do. There are other ways of committing people, but just to wrap up now, I'll give you the final element or principle of MINDSPACE is ego. E is for ego. We act in ways that makes us feel better about ourselves. We also have this desire to post self-image. So we tend to behave in ways that support the impression of positive and consistent self-image. And for example, instead of telling people about cancer, when they go on the beach, show them images of aging skin, which evidence shows is more likely to make them use sun protection. Right? So if you want to sell sun protections in Spain or in UK, especially during these heat waves here, show people images of aging, wrinkled skin, and they're going to run to the shop instead of telling you, oh, melanomas, be careful about skin cancer, whatnot. Another way to use the ego principle is put more expectation on people. The greater the expectation placed on people, the better we perform. We just want to fulfill the expectations placed upon us, not disappoint, to keep self-image in the mind of the other person. He must put a lot of in me, believes in me. That's why he has these high expectations of me. Therefore, I should not disappoint. I should keep my positive image consistent. So there are many other ways to use MINDSPACE. So I strongly recommend just go online, just Google MINDSPACE, and it's one of the most downloaded government reports by far. One of the most frequently downloaded government reports. And also we publish papers, we publish applications, companies use it. It's quite rich. It's not just 9 techniques, it's 9 sets or 9 categories of techniques. Each one of these breaks down into several behavioral laws, so you can use them to design whatever you're designing. Marketing campaign, organizational change, policy intervention, public health campaign, you name it.
Super. Love it. Ivo, thank you so much. Really, really fantastic to hear your rundown on MINDSPACE there. I know that I've heard that before, but I'm sure for anybody that hasn't, that's really eye-opening. So I'll put a link in the description here to the MINDSPACE paper so people can go and check that out.